Hello everyone, this is Strati Papa Giorgio,
and Father Michael Tischel,
and we are
an
Imperfect Podcast.
If anyone is devout and a lover of God, let them enjoy this beautiful and radiant festival. If anyone is a grateful servant, let them, rejoicing, enter into the joy of his Lord. If anyone has wearied themselves in fasting, let them now receive recompense. If anyone has labored from the first hour, let them today receive the just reward. If anyone has come at the third hour, with thanksgiving let them feast. If anyone has arrived at the sixth hour, let them have no misgivings, for they shall suffer no loss. If anyone has delayed until the ninth hour, let them draw near without hesitation. If anyone has arrived even at the 11th hour, let them not fear on account of tardiness. For the Master is gracious, and receives the last even as the first. He gives rest to him that comes at the 11th hour, just as to him who has labored from the first. He has mercy upon the last, and cares for the first. To the one he gives, and to the other he is gracious. He both honors the work and praises the intention. Enter all of you, therefore, into the joy of our Lord. And whether first or last, receive your reward. O rich and poor, one with another, dance for joy. O you ascetics and you negligent, celebrate the day. You that have fasted, and you that have disregarded the fast, rejoice today. The table is rich laden, feast royally, all of you. The calf is fatted, let no one go forth hungry. Let all partake of the feast of faith. Let all receive the riches of goodness. Let no one lament their poverty, for the universal kingdom has been revealed. Let no one mourn their transgressions, for pardon has dawned from the grave. Let no one fear death, for the Savior's death has set us free. He that was taken by death has annihilated it. He descended into Hades and took Hades captive. He embittered it when it tasted his flesh. And anticipating this, Isaiah exclaimed, Hades was embittered when it encountered thee in the lower regions. It was embittered, for it was abolished. It was embittered, for it was mocked. It was embittered, for it was purged. It was embittered, for it was despoiled. It was embittered, for it was bound in chains. It took a body and came upon God. It took earth and encountered heaven. It took what it saw, but crumbled before what it had not seen. O death, where is thy sting? O Hades, where is thy victory? Christ is risen, and you are overthrown. Christ is risen, and the demons are fallen. Christ is risen, and the angels rejoice. Christ is risen, and life reigns. Christ is risen, and not one dead remains in a tomb. For Christ, being raised from the dead, has become the first fruits of them that have slept. To him be glory and might unto the ages of ages. Amen. The Paschal homily of St. John Chrysostom.
Welcome everybody.
Welcome, everybody.
We have a Father Michael and I have a guest today.
Yes,
it's a surprise.
it is. He came like a thief in the night.
Like a thief in the night. He almost stole my phone.
Yeah.
His name happens to be John Marshall.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, John.
Good to be here.
Good to have you. And John is visiting the southern part of the country, and let me know just recently that he was going to be in town, and so we met up, and John did a beautiful recitation of the Paschal homily just now for us all, and
I read it. I don't know qualifying it.
Oh, it was.
Thank you.
It was joyful.
It was kind of a fan moment. He's my patron saint, so I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. That was fun.
Amen. He's a good man.
Yeah,
he's a good man. Good saint.
Who say John?
Yeah.
Yep.
He's all right.
He's cool.
Yeah.
So he's very important.
He's very important. He's
kind of wrote the liturgy and some other things.
Yeah.
Father of the church.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pillar. We definitely honor and reverence him. So Bright Week.
We're in Bright Week right now. We're on May 1st, Wednesday, and we're here to talk about that.
Right.
What But what are we talking about exactly?
Yeah, what are we talking about? And thank you, John, once again for joining our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's good to have you. Yeah. Bright Week is a beautiful time. It's sort of like the afterglow, the time of the afterglow of the explosive
the
events.
fallout.
The holy nuke.
That's right. It is. It was this like... It's so true. It's like, here we are, having just experienced this explosion of joy after a very difficult week of Holy Week and experiencing the Passion of Christ. We're the gates of hell have been ripped open, and here we are in the afterglow of all of that. And I thought that resurrectional joy would be a wonderful topic for our discussion today, both because it's so beautiful and meaningful, and also because it's somewhat elusive in many ways. I was reading recently on Facebook, someone had posted a little message to their friends, basically saying, hey, look, Christ is risen. It's a beautiful time, but let's also not forget that there are a lot of people who are still suffering, still grieving. Maybe someone just lost a loved one, or maybe someone lost their job, or this or that, and kind of like setting up the contrast or the juxtaposition between that massive cosmic event that happened and that continues to enter into our lives every year, but also, the realities of the challenges that we face as human beings, and not to kind of, and especially with the social media culture of this very sort of superficial sense of happiness and a curated self that we can put up. You see all these pictures of people smiling at Pascha and in church and everything, and it's like, it can become sort of difficult or maybe even depressing for people who are struggling with different things. So I kind of wanted to just offer that as a tension, I guess you could say, is that we've got this cosmic event that really happened, that continues to have its influence and effects in our everyday life, and yet we're human, we're fallen humans, we live in a fallen world, and how do we reconcile these two experiences?
Yeah, I have a thought, and that's not to take away from what they said, although maybe it will.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Let's do it.
But it reminds me of what Christ said when they poured, the woman poured the expensive oil on his head, and they were like, why can't we should give this to the poor? And he's like, you're gonna always have the poor with you. But I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But I will only be with you for a little bit longer. So I don't think people should. I mean, it's not what this person was saying.
Right. I see what you mean. So
don't feel bad that you enjoyed the resurrection.
It's kind of because there are survivor's guilt. Or
right. Like yeah. Don't feel. We shouldn't. I mean, I think they would agree. We shouldn't feel guilty or enjoying ourselves that day, because the world will always be the world.
Yeah. We will always have the poor inside us.
Well, yeah.
In a sense. That we are visited by the joy of the resurrection, but we still have our lives.
Right. Yeah.
We don't have everything we need. We're not always happy.
We think we don't have what we need.
Right. Sorry.
Well, either way, if you really don't have what you need, that may be true.
Yeah. So the way that you're taking that, Strati, is that sort of not to diminish our joy, because of I mean it's a very deep and interesting point that someone could still be joyful when there's brokenness and fallenness in the world,
and even those people could have joy,
and even people in the midst of that brokenness and fallenness could have joy. So then it really begs the question: is what is this joy? Because if joy, I mean, I think in many ways one could argue that you can't have happiness with brokenness, and like you can't be. It seems like the way that we understand happiness and suffering are somewhat mutually exclusive. Like you can't have lost your job and be happy about that.
Right.
Maybe if we're to define happiness as more of kind of this superficial feeling or something like that. So, and that's where I think this person was coming from as far as like Facebook and social media is concerned, is that we put these images up.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about
right, of like these kind of curated images, which are all smiley, and
I can definitely get behind that.
Instagram Christianity.
Yeah, Instagram Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to not forget that there are people that are going through traumatic experiences in their life, and that's why, I mean, in many ways, I think that's why our iconography in the church, the saints aren't smiling, right? So joy doesn't necessarily mean you have that kind of like, spray on, smile, on your face. In fact, so, if someone's grieving deeply the loss of a loved one and they walk into an Orthodox church, the reason why all the saints around them are not smiling, one reason is perhaps that they're not going to sort of feel this sense that everybody's like health and wealth gospel, kind of everybody's happy and, And I think, to be honest with you, in many ways, I think this gets at the overarching theme of our podcast being an imperfect podcast. The temptation for perfectionism that we have in our culture is also bound up in the temptation to always smile. As one priest blogger that I know put it, it's the tyranny of the smile. That no matter how you're feeling, no matter how much how depressed you are, or whatever the case may be, we all have to wear that smile if we're taking a picture of of ourselves, or it's like if we're meeting someone for the first time. Okay, there's a sense in which the ascetic practice, you could say, of still being congenial with somebody, even if you're really struggling, not just kind of like vomiting all of your inner emotions and the struggles on to somebody that you just met on the street. I still maintain
you're onto something there.
That and I do this myself. It's like no matter how I'm feeling, no matter how I'm doing, it's like when I see somebody, it's like I gotta be this like cheery, chipper, happy-go-lucky person. And the same goes with social media. The same goes with kind of the way that we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis. And so in a certain sense, it's a judgment on our superficial, artificial attempts to be happy, to see these saints who are not smiling but are joyful. And in many ways, if we want to experience that resurrectional joy, just like if we want to experience the perfection of Christ, we have to peel back that artificial layer of perfectionism. We have to peel back that artificial layer of superficial happiness that perfect happiness that I'm trying
artificial happiness.
Right. Peel that away to get to the real
thing.
Happiness, the real
thing. And we have to, and in doing that, we have to be able to sit with ourselves a little bit
and not see the real stuff.
And not
think there isn't any, maybe.
Right. To sit with to sit with what's there under the surface.
All right, what's
really
going on?
It's scary because our knee-jerk response is to cover that up because what we're so used to thinking is that artificial happiness is the thing that we need to hold on to.
Right.
But it's not until we've let go of that in many ways and begun to gently, not forcibly, but gently sort of acknowledge what's going on beneath the surface. And allow that to be offered up to God, that God's joy can actually start to seep in.
I feel like I meet a lot of people, if I may, who will greet one with that fake smile because they think they have to. They're enslaved by the tyranny of the smile, and you can feel the tension. Everything's fine, but it's not. And they're not only trying to convince other people, but they're trying to convince themselves.
Absolutely.
I do that sometimes.
Me too.
Trying to convince ourselves that it is okay so that we don't have to go to the not okay yet.
Right. Well, and going to the not okay is a moment of giving up control.
It's a death.
It's a death, and exactly, it's a death and control of my happiness, of my joy, of my self-fulfillment and all these things. As wonderful as those things are in and of themselves, if I'm holding on to those and I'm the arbiter of my own happiness and of my own control, it's hard to let go of that.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to lose control.
Yeah. We've talked about that.
I mean, this is in line with our...
And I think it's in line with human existence. So that's why it keeps coming up.
Right.
We're all trying... I mean, I think people want what they think is the best for them.
Right.
And I think a powerful prayer is to say to God to guide them.
Yeah.
An abbess once told me that. To ask for God to steer you.
Yeah. Guide
you in the way that you should go.
Yes.
And
thy will be done.
Right, thy will be done. And in doing that, you kind of assume that what he's going to guide you to will be the best thing for you,
right,
and will make you happy.
Sure.
In the way that he knows you need it.
And that I think is the case as well for Holy Week and Pascha. Yeah. I mean, when we first started out this journey of Holy Week, I was very struck by the words of Father Panayotis here at Holy Transfiguration, who basically suggested that we approach Holy Week in a spirit of trust, faith, and humility, and that we allow ourselves to sort of give ourselves over to God and to what He wants to show us during this week of experiencing Christ's passion and ultimately His resurrection. And I think there's something very important in that, because on one level we can look at these feasts and these celebrations in a very kind of sentimental way.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, actually, there are two sort of approaches, and we talked about this a little bit during our Holy Week Pascha podcast, our Holy Week podcast. We could either look at it in a intellectualized way. Father Alexander Schmemann talks about it this way, where it's like we sort of recall the events that happened and we intellectualize them. We kind of we turn them into an ideology, into a philosophy. We kind of draw and try to extract the meaning and the truths and the morals of what Christ did and things like that. So that's the intellectualization of it. Mm-hmm. We can also sentimentalize it, where we essentially
my grandma took me to Pascha.
Exactly. Yep. It's like kind of like, I remember all these beautiful traditions, and it's not Pascha until I've lit my candle and all these things. Right. And so turning it into an intellectual activity or an emotional activity,
like solely those things.
Things. Right. Yeah, those things in and of themselves are not bad.
No.
Right?
No.
And using our intellects, using our emotions, all these things are beautiful.
You can bring them all together.
Right. Yeah. You can bring them all together, but when it ends in those things, right, it's not bad, quote unquote. It's just not complete.
Yeah, incomplete.
Right? It's incomplete. Yeah. And so the real thing is to experience, is to actually enter into this experience, which means ultimately an abdication of control.
Yeah.
A surrendering of control, and an allowing for God to reveal Himself and His life in the way that He wants to do that.
Yeah.
And that's scary, because ultimately what you're saying is, God, I'm opening myself up to the possibility that I'm not going to experience joy during Pascha.
Oof.
Now, are you not going to experience joy during Pascha? Probably not. I mean, you probably will, because God is a good God, a loving God, wants the very best for us. But there is that inner tendency, if I don't give myself up over to God's holy and good and perfect and beautiful will, that I'm sort of saying, like, Pascha is all about joy. I need to experience this joy.
I think you're really, that's really good.
Thanks, Strati.
You're welcome.
That makes me feel really.
I'm glad. No, that's especially for, I'm thinking of like ascetics and monks to some extent. They're not always seeking joy in the way that we think of joy. And maybe what they need is a little suffering. Maybe we all need a little suffering once in a while. A little bit.
Yeah.
A little pinch. Actually, when I was in Cyprus, I said to my uncle, because I had been working long hours or whatever, and I go, suffering's not bad. He goes, don't you agree? He goes, no. No, it's not.
I don't agree.
I don't agree.
I like how simple that was. Right? It's like, he's become one with the suffering. He loves it. No,
he's a very
just a guy here, man. I heard like you.
He's a cool guy, but no, maybe what you need is a little bit of struggle, and so what God will bring you is struggle, and you need that struggle in order to achieve that happiness.
Oh, we got to sort of notice our struggle. Take off the Instagram smile.
Exactly.
And say, oh wait, there's already struggle here.
There's already struggle there.
Often, not always.
No, I think that's
right.
That's very true in the sense that, if we're life is struggle.
Well, if we're always expecting from God that you're always gonna be happy,
right?
That's just not what is gonna happen.
Exactly.
That you're gonna, and if you, for instance, let's say you ask God to reveal something to you about, you're asking Him for, maybe what He does is pour more struggle on you because He knows you can handle that.
You're not looking at here's more of it.
Right. Here's more of it. And that's for your benefit, is what I'm getting at. That's not just for ascetics. I shouldn't have said that. That's for everybody.
Every human.
Every human needs a little bit of struggle in order to taste, the fruits of that struggle when they overcome it.
It makes it more meaningful.
It makes it more meaningful.
Makes it even possible.
Right.
Sounds like Pascha too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone expected Christ to do something, and then His passion was like the biggest, loudest not doing ever.
Well, and that goes into
suffering. Suffering
and struggle.
We use the word suffering in a slightly different way, but there's the kind of more traditional alternative word or way of using the word, which is to allow, to suffer the little children to come unto me, the sense of allowing, and in the Greek it's the
Getting
same
out
thing.
Of the way.
Yeah, exactly. The pathi, the pathi, or to suffer something is to kind of is actually a passive. Actually, that's where we get the word passive from. Is the passion, right? It's a passive rather than an active thing. So you're enduring something. You're to suffer something is to kind of allow. So I think you're onto something, and I think, John, also what you mentioned as far as just peeling off that Instagram fakeness, so that we can just acknowledge what we're already enduring. Some psychologists have talked about sentimentality. Right. Thomas Kincaid. No, I don't want to bash Thomas Kincaid too much. He was an artist.
I have no sentimental feelings towards whoever that man is. I've never heard of him.
Yeah, he's an artist who kind of depicts these beautiful scenes with kind of glowing light and things like that. And it's pretty sentimentalized, and but this is one well-known psychologist, I don't remember who it was, Jung or someone like that, who basically talked about how sentimentality is a way for us to cover and to mask our inner chaos. And when sentimentality becomes this kind of like idol, you could say, in other words, when it's this kind of superficial Band-Aid that we try to put over what's going on inside of us, I think that's when it becomes problematic. Yeah. And I think that's when we have to start to come to terms with and encounter our inner suffering. Yeah. And it's only then, as we've been saying, that we can come to any sense of joy. But the big thing about all this is that I think, and this is what you were talking about a little, Strati, was that joy is not a goal. It's not something to be pursued. It's something that comes to us. Mm-hmm. It's something that surprises us, right? C.S. Lewis's book, Surprised by Joy. Mm. And so ultimately, what is it that we're pursuing? I think in many ways we have to acknowledge that what it is that we're pursuing is we're pursuing surrender. Yeah. The only true pursuit is to surrender into the hands of a loving God. Yeah. And to say, do with me what you will. Yeah. Which is scary. Yeah. Because do we trust God? Is God trustworthy, or is he a vengeful, small g God, right? That is worse
at certain times.
Intervenes at certain times, or that's worse. Worse than most humans. and seeks vengeance, and we have to kind of expiate for his...
Requires his casks of wine.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, he's gonna be jealous, or he's gonna smite you, right?
Flood.
The flood.
Well, it's like we're all expecting that kind of a reality from the divine. We're all expecting, it's all fine, because if we don't do that, then, well, what is beyond that? What is underneath? So like we said, peeling off, surrendering, not doing, all of that leads to honesty. The truth is we are suffering. Mm-hmm. We are not all there. We are not happy. We have pain. And then God's still there. Mm-hmm. He's there down at the very bottom.
Underneath all
of that.
Yeah.
It's like we try to make God with a smile on top of everything. That's not real. We peel that off.
That's an idol.
That's an idol. Right?
Yeah. It's a static idol.
We rip that off, throw it on the ground because it falls, smash it. It's like,
it's
really not true.
Really violent.
Trample it.
No, because
that's death.
If we think we're happy and then decide to go be honest, we can get really angry at our previous happiness,
right?
Because it wasn't true and it didn't follow up. It didn't fulfill what we wanted.
Oh, I mean that's the vicious
I've smashed
cycle.
on my happiness.
Absolutely, that's the vicious cycle, especially during these big feasts where it's like it just gets so exacerbated because. At any other day, it's like, well, I should be happy, but it doesn't really matter. But no, this is the feast of feasts, the holy days of holy days.
I'm very proud of you for bringing this back. You're doing a great job. Yeah. I'm not even joking.
But the feast itself, we're all expecting things to get better, but they got progressively worse until God died.
Right.
Well, what happened there? What the heck? Everyone's at the
disciples,
depth, the worst possible outcome. Right. The one thing we did not want to happen.
Our Messiah dying.
And yet, God was still there.
And that was the victory.
The best possible outcome.
And and I think there's a couple thoughts that
it's like an Endgame went... No, I'm kidding. No. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys.
Don't spoil Endgame. It was a good movie. It was 3 hours, but it was good. Oh, man. It was long, but it was good. Yeah. Anyway.
Never saw it.
You haven't seen any of them, so...
No. That's all right. You have a life. No, I'm kidding.
I have my head under a rock. I'm living under a rock, head in the sand. Just
You're an ostrich.
Metaphors. I'm an ostrich. Yes.
How long is it going for? Okay, so no, but I think that's another part of what we were talking about icons, and in that they're not smiling and happy because this world was never Christ. Never. In fact, he said the opposite would happen. That this is not going to be fun.
Right.
You're not going to enjoy. I'm not promising you joy in this world.
Right.
But joy in the next world, almost.
Right. Yep.
So we need to partake in the joy of the next world, almost.
Right.
In this life, and that's what the icons are kind of reminding us, I think.
But in order to get to that joy, we have to go through the cross.
Yeah.
Which the saints did.
Which they did.
So it's like if we're really not happy and we're trying to be honest, they're kind of witnessing to our current unrevealed joy, our current suffering.
Which is why when some people walk into the church, it's more of a feeling of judgment than of peace if they're living this life of false happiness. If they're clinging onto this idol of false happiness. And I want to acknowledge how difficult this is.
It's awful.
It
really is.
I mean, it's the most difficult thing any of us can and will ever go through.
If we do, it takes a long time.
Yeah, and to put it another way, there's a Greek theologian, Papa Thanasiou, who it's a great name by the way, who talks about these idols that we set up for ourselves, and I think in that we can include this sort of superficial happiness as coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Coping mechanisms for what? For the freedom of God, right? And that's where surrender is very hard, because I'm surrendering myself to a free God that doesn't work with my logic and that does not work on my terms.
Who does not require sacrifice.
Who does not
blood
anymore. In this kind of transactional, magical way. Payment, right?
Which is it's very human to want that, to want to manipulate God.
Maybe that's why we wanted our Greek gods. Maybe that's why we expected the tasks to be requested.
Exactly. The ancient Greeks, they would even go to the point of tricking their gods. They would when they would do a sacrifice, sometimes they would take out the good bits of the meat of the animal, hide them, and then sacrifice the rest of it to trick the god, the deity.
Sure.
I did it. I sacrificed you a whole animal, but really they took out the best parts.
Right.
That manipulation of the deity, that's so human, I think.
It's so human.
It's still all human interaction.
Right.
It all goes back to this desire for control.
Yeah.
And if I can, and that if I can control things in that sense, I don't have to fully give myself over, fully surrender, and I don't have to it doesn't have to be a radical, life-changing.
Well, it's also scary.
It's scary to surrender.
Right.
Right. Well, why is it scary?
Well, have you ever fallen backwards, assuming somebody's going to catch you?
Right.
It's just
you have to
the impulse.
What's scarier, though, to do that or to not do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
In other words, if we look at it from the ultimate sense, if our hands are tightly grasped on our lives, in this sense of control, and we never release that.
Yeah.
Like, think about it from the end game. What's scarier? What's scarier? To risk the possibility of being dashed to pieces at the bottom of the chasm after we've flung ourselves over, trusting that somebody's going to carry us away, or to hide in fearful kind of cowering, wilting away.
My father told me this story from when, my father's from Cyprus, and he was 17. If any of you don't know, Cyprus was invaded by Turkey, the country of Turkey, in 1974. And he was there. He was among the people who had to flee the northern part of Cyprus that was then occupied. And he said that there was this older woman who kept going around saying, "Glory be to God. Glory be to God. Glory be to God." And he asked somebody, and if he found out that woman lost her husband and all her children. But she just kept going around saying in Greek, "Doxa si o Theos. Glory to you, O God."
Yeah, she's crazy. No.
Yeah, we would say she's crazy today.
Well,
Western.
No, we would.
Yeah.
My was not in disagreement with that.
Right.
We would say she's crazy, and what I'm in beholding that verbal image of what you just put forth as far as this woman going around saying,
really good accent there. Kind of really summoned her.
Yeah.
The presence of the old older Greek lady.
Right.
I met a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, no. So we have the reality of this horrible trauma that she experienced through losing her loved ones.
Yeah.
And then the vision of her kind of illumined by doxology and by gratitude.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, how did she get to that point?
Yeah.
And however she got to that point, which again I think is first of all a miracle in and of itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
But is also certainly a miracle and a gift, but also an illustration of her own disposition of desiring to give herself over to God no matter what happens, like Job, right?
Sure.
Having that Jobian sense of surrender to God's faithfulness.
Job is the one that
loses
and then gains again.
Right, and Satan goes to God at the beginning of the book, basically asking for his blessing.
It's like, hey, can I go torment this guy?
And God, in a very kind of
it's kind of weird,
intense moment, gives Job over to the devil. And says, you can do anything that you want to him and with him, just don't take his life.
Yeah.
And why did he do that? God only knows. But we could also say that it in a way it reveals the inner Job, right? And Job is being tested and tried, and all these things are happening to him, and at the end he still blesses and glorifies God.
Exactly.
Even though everything,
So there you have it. That was a story from 5,000 years ago, and this was a story from 1974.
Right.
The same kind of doxology unto God.
Yep.
And in both of
terrible circumstances.
We say we praise God when things go well, and Satan was going to say, hey, look, one bad thing and he will curse you just like everyone else.
Right.
Because that's what we expect.
Right.
Bad things are happening. Meh.
Right.
Yeah.
God doesn't love me.
Yep.
But you know what? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to be joyful when things are bad.
Right.
It doesn't make sense because we can't see it yet.
It doesn't make sense in our human logic.
Right. In our immature human logic.
Because with the idol, covering
spiritually
over the top, we're like, no, what?
Right.
Everything's fine. That's why I'm happy. But you don't have it good. Why are you happy? That doesn't make sense. That's scary.
When life intervenes in a traumatic way, whether it's when we lose somebody or whatever, essentially what's happening is it's smashing that idol that's covering the real challenge of life. And when that idol is smashed, then our first response is to curse God.
Yep.
It's to curse life.
Yep.
And to say, why is this happening to me? Right? But wisdom tells us to not end there, to go a step farther, a step deeper, a deeper surrender, and that ultimately the saints of our church who have reached that final telos, that final end, and we who have experienced this in little drops throughout our lives can say that ultimately life is light, and it's that if we surrender ourselves to life, we'll go through, and if we surrender ourselves to God, we'll go through all of the ups and downs and challenges and traumas and everything that life has to offer us. Yeah. But in surrendering ourselves to that, we will pass through that, and we will experience the resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's always having that hope, that resurrectional hope, beyond all hope, against all hope. Like Abraham sacrificing his own son.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Almost sacrificing his own son.
Well, to him, he was doing it.
Right.
He was done.
He was doing it.
Yeah, he was ready to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And that son was the only way the promise that God made to him that he would be the father of all nations would be fulfilled.
Yep.
Yep. I mean, what the heck?
Yeah. This doesn't make sense.
Right.
God's taking back what he promised.
Right. Okay. God's taking it back, and so there's hopelessness.
Yep.
And so Abraham's hope was against all hope.
Yep.
It was saying, okay, everything is hopeless. There is no possible way through human logic or through natural means that this promise will be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And yet, I hope in God.
You are God.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And how can someone, I was having a conversation actually with Father Panagiotis about this, because how could someone possibly have that kind of trust without just being totally insane? It's like God tells you to, and I think, with Noah, we hear that that he was righteous, that God accounted righteousness to him because he was pure and because he walked with God. He walked with God, and
Such a physical representation.
Yeah,
you walk with God.
Walk with God, right? He was a man who walked with God, and I think Abraham. It doesn't say this in Genesis, but I think Abraham was a similar character in the sense that even this extreme act of surrender that he gave was really the tip of a very big iceberg. In other words, he had been cultivating, you could say, this relationship with God, probably hidden from our eyes for so many years, and in so many ways where he was with God and God was with him, and he had tasted of the sweetness of God and the faithfulness of God, and he had been faithful to God,
practicing all the little sacrifices,
right? Exactly,
one after another,
the little ways in which he kind of gave his will to God, and God responded in faithfulness,
like a muscle.
He had been exercising that muscle. Askesis, right? Exercise, that he had been doing this. So,
is joy like that?
Well, I think it is, because I think God promises us joy.
Yeah.
Right?
So if I don't feel it, should I just go do it? Is there a way to just flex my joy muscle?
Well, I would say yes and no, in the sense that I would say that the flexing of the joy muscle in the way that I see it, and y'all can chime in and see what you think, is that is the hope that joy has the last word. Ooh. So, in other words, no matter what's happening to me in my life, right? And Pascha is sort of the apex. It's like it's the climax of the year. And it's the hope that no matter what happens, no matter what kind of emotional, psychological, relational, occupational problems I may be going throughout this time, joy will have the last word.
Yeah.
And how do I know that? How can I? In many ways, it takes this kind of holy foolishness to kind of not even, to kind of, in the midst of all those things, to just be like, okay, yeah, you're right. This is bad. This really stinks. And sometimes I think that the way that we go one step further is not always intellectual. It's not always in our minds. In other words,
you can't leave it in the intellectual.
Right, you can't leave it into the intellectual. Some ways that we go a step further are by having a cup of tea.
Another physical thing.
Right.
Walk with God.
Yeah,
Drink tea with God.
Drink tea. Just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Take a nap.
Yeah.
Go for a run. Exercise.
Yeah.
I think there are ways of exercising this wisdom of hope against all hope in a very kind of like holistic way.
Don't feel strong. Okay, go act like you're strong. Go take a run.
Right.
But then we do that all the time.
Yeah.
If we want to get strong, we know exactly what to do.
Yep.
We know exactly that to flex our muscles damages them, but then builds them back again.
Right.
But what we're not doing is we're not going to exercise so that we can acquire that joy.
Mm.
We're going to exercise so that we can cope with the absence of the joy in a way that is both realistic, subtle, simple, humble, and then the joy is never going to come because we are demanding that it comes.
Oh, so we're not flexing joy, the muscle. We're flexing the waiting for joy.
Waiting.
How
do you wait?
Saint Silouan.
You prepare time. Like you set time aside.
Saint Silouan. I don't think I ever read his full life, but I do remember that he said, he left for the desert prematurely. Mm-hmm. He left the monastery before his time, and he said that he lost grace, and he wept and wept and wept and wept until it finally kind of returned, or it did return.
It did, yeah.
And that sort of, he lost it. It's a gift. It's given and it's taken.
Exactly.
It's not something that you don't. I learned how to run really fast. That's not how it works.
Right.
It's not something you do. It's something God does, and that's counterintuitive to what we do in everything we do. I learned how to drive really well. I learned it.
Right.
But this isn't one of those things. This is something that is bestowed upon you.
Right.
So we learn how to receive it.
Exactly.
Properly.
And to hold on to it.
And to hold on to it.
Oh,
not with a tight grasp.
Right.
Oh yeah.
But in a way that it doesn't run away from us.
Yeah.
And that's for Saint Silouan, that was humility.
That's humility.
Learning humility was his way of. But then we see Saint Silouan was a powerful, monumental example of basically not despairing. Keep your mind in hell and despair not. So whether your mind is already in hell or whether you bring it down into hell, just don't despair. But then his disciple, Elder Sophrony, and then his disciple, Elder Zacharias, kind of, and some of Elder Sophrony's other disciples sort of rephrased Saint Silouan's, the word that God gave to Saint Silouan in a more kind of contemporary way. So for example, Father Sophrony would talk about take yourself to the brink of despair, and when you can't take it anymore, take a step back and drink a cup of tea. That was his thing.
Yeah, I heard that.
Drink a cup of tea.
Yeah.
In the words of Father Raphael Noica, who's a Romanian disciple of Elder Sophroni, he said, in modern terms, that would be go take a nap. And he even references St. Isaac the Syrian, who says that when blasphemous thoughts assail you, cover yourself up and go to sleep.
Oh.
So there are these very kind of simple ways of
That's not
hanging
complicated
on.
at all.
No.
Yeah.
Just hang in there. Just hang in a little bit more. And if mentally you can't hang in, then do something non-mental. In other words, take a nap to reset yourself. So there are these very kind of seemingly non-spiritual things that are actually deeply spiritual, and because it's all contributing to this waiting.
Very interesting.
This waiting game. So it's like joy. No, we don't pursue joy. It comes to us.
Yeah.
We pursue waiting in a way that doesn't look like pursuing it, so that we don't
long suffering.
It sounds like you gotta not pay it any mind. It's like you gotta pretend you don't. Wait, you were saying
that's exactly
this
right.
Conversation before.
Yep.
You said somebody who said you gotta
Saint
pretend
Porphyrios.
like you don't care.
Yeah, it's kind of
Saint
like
Porphyrios.
Yeah, just kind of like showing seeming indifference almost because we don't want to we don't want to sort of give the devil more than we need to, and when he notices that we care, then it's like, but no, it's like whatever, whatever, and so and
interesting.
And that whatever is actually a form of surrender.
Yes,
that whatever is a form of saying, "Thy will be done," in a very subtle way, in a gentle way.
That's really good. That's good, and it reminds me from the Old Testament that God came as a breeze.
That's right. Not thunder. As a breeze, a still small voice.
Yeah. So it again. I think I've said this every episode. Paradoxes. Every episode.
Paradox.
Paradoxo.
Yeah.
Doxa sea Dios.
Yeah.
I mean.
So should we wrap this up?
Let's do it.
Okay.
So I'm sad, but I'm pretending to be happy. I go to church on Pascha. Everyone else is happy.
Right.
I feel like something's not right.
Yeah.
Especially because all these saints aren't really smiling either.
Oh.
Right. So then I get so bent out of shape that I just leave it all and say...
Say, darn this.
Right.
I'm angry.
Yeah.
And then I'm sad again once the anger subsides.
And all of that is a fist tightly clenched.
Gotcha.
All of that is still not being able to release my fist to be able to give myself over to God
and trust in Him.
And to not pursue joy,
right?
Yeah.
But to pursue surrender.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so with the fist, you're either holding on to the happiness,
right,
the fake one,
or
you're angrily smashing the old fake happiness.
Or you could be doing both.
Or both. they're really two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. And so the only thing left to do is to open the hand.
Right.
And let go.
And even that takes grace.
It takes grace. And we have no idea if our hand will ever be filled. And yet, you know what? For so many people, like, what is it? Like as a Chinese or a Japanese philosopher, he said, happiness is a bird that may land in your hand.
That may land in your hand. I like that.
Yeah.
Well.
And it always does, actually.
Yeah,
just
it
want
really
to say,
does.
And it surprises you.
Surprised by joy.
So you're surprised.
I was about to end this podcast.
and it comes unexpectedly, and it always does.
I'm glad I didn't, because that we needed that. No, you're absolutely right. It always comes. It always comes, and we're at, I don't know what this will be down to when I edit it, but we're at
a short podcast.
Right, it will not be a short podcast. We're at 51 minutes basically. That's good. But I think that also that can also be said for out of every terrible thing, a good thing can happen.
Right.
And maybe the terrible thing, in some way, was good that it happened.
Sure.
A
lot of people.
Friends, just my dad always said that the invasion of Cyprus was good for Cyprus in a roundabout sort of way, because then people started to seek out monasteries to seek out spirituality a little bit more, because
Wow.
they had, right before that, they had just entered into a period of tourism, and people were kind of becoming kind of monetarily more affluent and less spiritual in a sense. And then once the invasion hit, everybody started running to monasteries and seeking out. So, anything else we want to add?
May we experience the joy of the resurrection as it comes, by the grace of God, by the mercy of God, in God's time, and may we learn the art of all arts, which is the art of simply, humbly, gently waiting, surrendering, and allowing God to work on God's time, on God's terms. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for joining us.
Absolutely. And thanks for
I'm glad we had you on.
bringing me on.
That was nice.
Thanks, John, for surprising us.